and welcome to my channel, Fred Makes Things. Today is my Sewers Club review video for July 2022. If you don't know what Sewers Club is a monthly subscription box where for a certain amount of money you get all of the things needed to make one sewing project. Scissors, ironing machine, sewing machine, things like that not included, but like your pattern, your fabric, your thread, any kind of fasteners or notions that you might need to finish it, all that stuff is included. So yeah, let's just jump into this video. So as always, this video is going to be in 4 loose parts. Part 1 is talking about what came in the box. Part 2 is assembling the project. Part 3 is pros, cons, and user error. And then part 4 is final thoughts and sign off. So yeah, let's just jump right into part 1. Normally I keep everything in this box, right? The box that Sewers Club, the project, comes in. But I haven't folded everything up or anything like that. So the box is basically empty. So we'll just set that right aside. So in this box we had 2 different projects options. We had the Swimmer's round bag. Which was the main project. It was more difficult, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then we have the poolside crossover bag, which they said is for a much easier pattern to follow, which makes sense. It's also fat quarter friendly, apparently. But I did the Sewers Club Swimmer's round bag. But I just wanted you to see that there was this alternative pattern as well. It's quite a bit shorter. And then for fabric, we had 3 different fabrics. We had this pink one here. We had this striped one here, and then we had the Swimmers like this. I have a large piece of the Swimmers. As I was gonna say, I don't have much of this left, but it looks like this. I have bits and pieces of it left. I don't have much at all of the stripe. I have quite a bit of this pink. I don't have it in my little scrap box, which is weird. But I do have quite a bit, or I do have some of the pink left. I have like little bits and pieces of the Swimmers left, and almost nothing of the stripe left. So this is actually some of the bias tape that I made, and then this is the bias piece. The tape piece. The piece of fabric that I used to make the bias tape, the binding tape. The other thing that came in the box was the thread, which I used up all of it, so I can't talk about that. Or I can't show it to you, but it was blue. And I'll show it to you on the finished bag. And this bias tape maker, which I didn't use, but I'm sure will come in handy in a future project. Okay, so we're going to talk about part 2 now, and I'm just going to lay out some of the stuff that I have for part 2 here, the instructions and whatnot, so that I can go over it while I'm talking about it. Yeah, so I made the round bag. They said that this was for more of an advanced sewer, and they were right. But we'll get into that in a minute. So this was probably one of the most difficult pieces that I've had to work with. They gave you a bunch of different templates to follow, right? Which I did. I cut out all of my templates and followed them properly. It was also the first time that they had you working with this kind of foam stuff, to my knowledge. Like this stuff here. They call it they just call it fusible foam. Bosal in R form single-sided fusible foam stabilizer. Anyway, so they had you do a bunch of cutting. There wasn't a whole lot of cutting. Like there's been other projects that have required more pieces, but it was a lot of curved cutting. You can follow the cutting diagrams if you like. I kind of did my own thing, but that was because I wanted to focus on certain aspects of the swimmers, right? Because there's a couple of like good looking swimmer guys, so I wanted to keep those ones in frame, I guess, on the pattern or on the finished project. Sorry, I'm still a little sick. Like my thoughts are still a little disjointed. But yeah, so they had you do some rounds of fabric A, which was the swimmer's fabric, and then a couple of rectangles and then some zipper tabs. They did couple more like half rounds of fabric B, which was for me the stripe, and a whole bunch of rectangles, and a couple of D-ring tabs. And then on fabric C, they did 2 full circles, one large square to turn into the bias strips, some zipper tabs, and again some more rectangles. And then for the foam, they had again more rounds and some rectangles. And then for the fusible fleece, they only needed 1 strip of fusible fleece for the strap. The other thing that you needed in this project was a zipper and 2 D-rings. So cutting took forever because it was a bunch of circles. I cut out I cut out the half rounds on fabric A separately because, like I said, I was focusing on those 2 images. For fabric B, I cut out the half rounds at the same time, and for fabric C, I did the 2 full rounds at the same time. And then with the foam, I had to do everything separately just because I didn't have a whole lot of foam, so I couldn't really double up on any of them. And yeah, so the first thing that they had you do was attach... Okay, let's start again. Actually, no, that's where I'm going. Oh my God. So the first things they had you do after cutting everything out, right, ironing all your fabric, cutting your fabric out, was to attach the top part and the bottom part of fabric A and B, your rounds, to make a full circle. And then they had you sew that together. Then they also had you sew your 2 strips of fabric B together that made your strap. From there, they had you do all of the fusing that you needed to do for the project. You fused your 2 foam pieces to the back of your main exterior body pieces, and then they had you do a decorative stitch. I just did a really simple top stitch going over through the center seam, right on top and below the center seam. They had you do attach the foam to 2 smaller rectangles that would comprise the top of your bag, so fabric A, and then a larger rectangle that was fabric B. And then they had you attach your fusible fleece to the strap that you made. From there, they had you then do the two side straps, the two decorative hanging bits. They had you knock that out first, and then they had you do the pocket. And then with the pocket, they did the pocket like they normally do. Or actually, I shouldn't say that. Like they did on the apron. And kind of like what I stole as an idea for my Scrappy project in June. They had you take your bottom round, or like your front facing round or whatever, attach a strip of your fabric C to it, and then the other part of your, or the other pocket round that you had cut out of fabric A to the other side, fold them together, right? Iron them together, I should say. Fold them right sides facing each other, and then they had you flip them around, iron flat, tuck in the piece that was still remaining, and sew shut. They recommended using pinking shears on the inside to cut down on the bulk, and that's what I did. I forgot to take a photo of it, but I did do that. Then from there, they had you use this template here to align your pocket. The fabric was see-through enough that you could see where you were supposed to put the pocket, and they had you sew that in place, leaving your top open, of course. From there, they had us start working on the zipper, and like they always do, actually they always do, and they did this a little differently as well. They had us attach zipper pulls, and what I did this time, instead of like following exactly what they did or suggested, is I made my zipper tabs a little bit wider to work with, because I thought that that would make it easier later to incorporate them into the bag without having that weird fraying that I've been getting. And it did. It worked quite well. So they had you do fabric A for the top of your zipper tab, and then they had you do fabric C, your lining fabric, for the underside of your zipper tab. And then they had you attach, right, all of those together. Then they had you do the foam pieces with fabric A on them, keeping directionality in mind so that the top of your bag made sense with the rest of your bag. They did that, right? Had you attach the top and the lining at the same time. And then they had you measure it all out and cut it down so that your top measured 3 inches wide. Then they had you make your D-ring tabs. They had you just fold the fabric in half. Fold the fabric in half, flip it inside out, the right side out, and do a decorative stitch like usual. And I forgot to say that earlier on, they also, when they were having you do the decorative straps, they also had you finish your other strap in the usual Sewers Club fashion as well. Sew the strap together right sides facing, and then flip it over, and then do a decorative top stitch on top to finish off the strap. Then once you had your D-ring tabs in place, they had you baste them over top onto your zipper area so that everything was good to go. And then they also had you baste your lining fabric to your fabric B piece with the foam attached to create the bottom of the bag. Honestly, up until this point, everything was making sense to me. I did a few minor errors that I had to go back and fix, which I will talk about in the next section. But I was cruising along, doing quite well with all of it. It took me a while, just because of some of the mistakes I made. But in general, up until this point, it was quite easy. There wasn't anything too strenuous or difficult with it. And then they had you do the binding strips. And what they did is they had you take your 16-inch square piece of lining fabric, or a fabric C, cut it in half diagonally, sew those two diagonal pieces together to create I want to say a polygon. That might not be right. The picture shows you. I can't think of the word for it right now. But, right, your two sides were slanted. And that just kind of made the fabric have more give to it. And then they had you cut 1.5-inch strips out of these. And I'll talk about it later, but I wish I had cut wider strips. And we'll talk about why in a minute. That's in pros, cons, and user error. And then from there, they had you attach your lining, or baste your lining pieces. Baste your lining pieces of your rounds onto your exterior body rounds so that everything was ready to go for your next steps. I also forgot to say that when they had you do your zipper piece and your bottom piece to this bag, they also had you sew those pieces together to create like a round tunnel, a short tunnel. Like a 3-inch tunnel, right? Quite round and 3 inches. And then they had you dry fit that into your circles to make sure that everything fit. I thought everything did. It came out later that it did not, and I had some fixing to do. When you were sure of all of that, you took 2 pieces of the lining fabric that you had cut previously, wrapped them around your ends, right? Use them as binding to make the ends look nice and clean. Now back to the lining pieces. So now everything is kind of ready to go, right? You have your binding strips cut. You've sewn 2 pieces. You were to sew 4 binding strips together. Sorry. You were to cut 4 binding strips, and then you were to sew 2 of those binding strips together to make 1 long strip, and you did it twice, right? So you have 2 long strips, 1 for each side of your bag. You have your lining pieces for your exterior body bag done, right? They're basted in place on the circles. They're basted and then sewn into place on your they call it a gusset, so we'll call it the gusset, right? The pieces, the middle of your bag, right, that held the zipper and things like that. So then it came to be like, we're already here at step 39. Right, out of 45. So you're like, oh, we're in the home stretch. And then this is where everything kind of went off the rails. And that's because I hate binding. I hate binding so much. And I think if I had given myself that extra 2 inches of space, everything would have been better. Or an extra 1/2 inch, everything would have been better, I think. Or come up with a different way of binding. But yeah, so first off, they had you baste into place your first exterior round piece into your gusset. And this is when I realized that my gussets didn't match. Sorry, that my gusset was a little too wide or too big for my circles, and that's because I didn't double check measurements before I sewed everything together. And that was because of some mistakes I had made earlier on in the sewing process. So after some trial and error and a lot of used thread, I figured out how much I needed to shorten each side by. And so I just did a quick stitch about 1/4 of an inch above my binding strip. I didn't take any photos, I don't think, really, from this point on. I think I took a photo of the binding sewn into one side of the bag. I don't know. You'll see whatever I have taken photos of, but from here things just got really frustrating. So after I fixed the gusset, I basted in the first round that already had the binding strip attached to it. What they wanted you to do is attach the binding strip to the round on each side first, and then fit that into your gusset. And yeah, so I did it the first time and the gusset was the wrong size, so I had to tear it apart. And then I fixed the gusset, still wasn't the right size, so I had to tear it apart again. Then on the third time, I finally got the round to fit into the gusset properly and everything was going smoothly, until I realized that I had actually sewn part of my binding strip into my basting stitch so that I couldn't wrap it around. It was a mess. So I had to tear that apart again and reattach the round part of most of the round actually back to the gusset after I had pinned the binding strip out of the way so it wouldn't get sewn back into what I was working on. And it was at this point that I ran out of thread. So I gave up for the day, and I came back to it the next day, which was yesterday, Sunday. Pulled out a pink color that I had for a different project, and I used that to finish it. And honestly, I'm probably a bit happier to have the pink rather than the blue. So I finished sewing the basting the round in, and then I think they wanted me to do the other side next before completing the binding, but I just wanted to get one side completely done so I didn't have to worry about it. So then I had to wrap the binding around the fabric, right around all of that. I had to trim some excess pieces off to make it thin enough for the 1 1/4 inches or so that I had left of this 1.5 inch binding. And for the most part it fit, but it didn't fit very well, and I don't like it. I don't like the finished product at all. And I was impatient to rip it all out and try it again, because I think a part of this is just because I've been sick and I tried to do this project too soon after starting to feel better, if that makes sense. There's a couple things that I've learned about sewing. One of them is like you don't cut or sew when you're tired, and I think that can be said for when you're sick too, because you make really, really stupid mistakes. And we'll talk all about that in user error, because there is a lot of user error in this bag. So anyway, so I finished attaching all of the binding to the one side, and then I flipped it around, learned from my mistakes on the first side, pinned all of my binding material out of the way, basted my circle in, realized that part of it wasn't sitting properly, kept tearing it apart and redoing it. Probably took me like an hour to get the second circle basted in properly. Then did my binding around that as well. Right, to clean up all of the edges. And then I just needed to attach the strap to the bag and tie the little decorative ties on. And that took me not very long, actually. Once the binding was done, everything else came together pretty quickly. The whole project took me probably 2 hours to cut out, 10 hours, maybe 12 hours, 14 hours. It's hard to say because it was spread over 2 days of work to put together. And a lot of it might have been better if I had just waited another week to try to make this. I think the only reason I didn't is because I wanted to get content out for you all, because I like doing that, and that's what messed me up. So, without further ado, this is the finished bag. I see it's collapsed on a corner. Here's the one side, right, with this girl kind of focused. Right, here's the decorative stitching that I did. This here is just erasable marker that will disappear. Here's the other side with the dude that I kept centered, right? More decorative stitching. Here's the bottom. You can kind of see here it's not evenly sewn. Like, it's wider on the sides than it is through here. I'm not sure how that happened. Here's the top. Like, the top looks pretty nice. It zips nicely. Like, that looks nice, I think. We'll talk about the sides. They had you tie them differently, but I just tied it like this. Right? Both sides. Like that. It would have been better if they'd given us a circle, I think, rather than a D-ring. And then the mess that is the interior. I'll just pop this inside out. So here's the one side. There's still some loose threads that I haven't snipped. Here's your pocket. Here's the other side. A few more loose threads that I haven't snipped. And the mess that is the binding. And the sides, also quite a mess. When I'm done talking and stuff, and when I'll sit down one day and I will clean up some of this stuff, hand stitch some of it, do all of that to try to make it look a little bit neater. But for now, this is what we have. So yeah, I'm gonna end up flipping this inside out a couple of times, I think, while I talk about this next section. So here we are, we're moving right on to pros, cons, and user error. Pro. I really like the idea of this bag. I like the size of this bag. Like, here's my husband's Kindle. It's about the size of my wallet. It fits in here nicely, right? Like, so it gives you an idea on size. It'll hold enough stuff. I'm going to transfer my bag out that I'm currently using. I'm going to use this for the next couple of days to see how it goes. I love the colors. I love the colors together. I really love the color of this stripe. I really like the swimmers. I think they're really cute. I like how nautical and summery and beachy this feels. Like it's right up my alley. I like being able to work with that foam. I've never used it before, and it posed some challenges. But after having made this big, I kind of have a better understanding of it. Yeah, I'll most definitely make this bag again, because I do like it. I like the pattern and I like the look of it. Cons. It has binding, and I hate binding. And part of me thinks that some of the binding some of my hate for the binding is because it gives me such a hard time. And it might give me such a hard time because I hate it so much, you know? But that could just be me. The other con, which I was really surprised at, is I like the look of this fabric, but I don't like how it performed. This pink is a little bit stretchy, was hard to work with. Like if you look on my strap, you'll see that it's not uniform, and that's because it kept pulling weirdly when I was sewing it. So like it looks okay, but it's not a uniform width. And it was cut to be a uniform width, so I'm not sure why it's not sitting that way. The same thing with here, it's not uniform. I don't know why, like I don't know why it like tugged. It's really thin and fine, so it was hard to work with. Like I almost wish that I had put some interfacing or something in these to make them a little bit more sturdy, just so that they sewed nicer. There's like this pinch here that I have to hand stitch in, it looks like, right? That bothers me because it shouldn't have happened there, but this fabric was pulling. And then here, like I did just like a minor little seam rip, and it just fell apart on me, so I have to like go in and hand stitch and clean up this little hole here too. And it shouldn't just fray like that. The same with my lining fabric. My lining fabric is very, very like thin and delicate. Like very thin and delicate. This is a binding strip, but like you can almost see through it. Like you can't on this, well I don't know, can you see on the screen how thin it is? I don't know if you can or not, right? But like I can see the swimmers through here pretty easily. And because it's so thin, it doesn't sew nicely. It doesn't sit nicely. Like it puckers and bumps, and like my rounds were perfectly lined up, and I had cut off any of like the extra spacing or whatever, and like it looks like it's a mess. Like I wish it was just like a little bit stiffer, right? Like I understand why they did it, probably so that there was like a nice amount of give when you were using it as a binding strip, but I think it kind of makes the bag look a little cheap on the inside. And this is the very, very first time that I'm a little upset at the quality of the fabric from Sewers Club. I've been getting these boxes since January of 2021, and this is the first time that I can say the fabric looks nice, but I don't know if I like the quality of it. That's a little sad. My other con, which is minor, is that I wish that this was a circle rather than a D-ring. I think that then it would, like, these straps would sit better, or if they had a better chance or better way of figuring out how they wanted to attach these. To me, they almost feel like an afterthought. Like, I think they look cute on the finished bag, but they feel like an afterthought. Yeah, all right. So, user error. There's more in this than I've been making a lot of really silly mistakes lately, it seems like. I want to go back to the months where I'm like, no user error, let's move on. Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. That's not the case in here. So let's start with these ties. I don't know what it was, but the top stitching looks just awful on it. And like my tension is wrong on my machine, which is a me thing. My like little whatever these are, curvy bits at the bottom could have been cleaner. They look just like a mess. Oh, that's my other con, actually. Normally I like a contrasting thread, but I hate the blue with this pink and white. I really wish it had been pink and not blue, because I think the pink on here would be cute, but I hate the amount of contrasting blue I have on everything. Hate it. But yeah, so these ties don't sit very well. There's quite a few like errors on them. I might redo them, or at least redo the top stitching. I haven't decided. All right, I put a puncture here. I have this here, this little pucker. I saw it, but I couldn't go back and fix it. Also, like this whole bottom isn't sewn evenly, so it's not a uniform width going through, and I'm not sure how I managed to do that. My other user error is I cut the zipper an inch short. I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. So then I had to do some piecing together of the zipper pulls. So like here you can see it's the same on the inside, and here you can see, and then on the inside you can see that there's more than one layer of zipper pull, and that was to make up for it. And then the problem is when I was making sure that the width of this was 3 inches, because it needed to be 3 inches, I forgot to double check my length, and that's what threw me off when I was sewing it together. Like this they call the gusset, together with the rest of it. So it's not my best project. I don't think it's my worst project. But it's not my best. Also, now that I'm looking at it, I tried so hard to get my pocket to be straight, and now that this is sitting like straight, I can see that my pocket inside is crooked. Lovely. And then my last error is how messed up the binding is. It's just like a mess. There's pieces that didn't incorporate all the way, and they're like all kind of frayed. I'll have to go in and clean up. Some of it's puckered and bubbled, and it's not pretty. Like, at least it's on the inside and you can't see it, but it's a bit upsetting that it happened. So now let's get to part 4, my final thoughts and user error. Final thoughts. I like the idea of this bag. I don't like the execution. I don't really, like, I like the colors and the styling of this bag, but I don't like the quality of the fabric that was used. The swimmer is great, but this beautiful pink and white stripe I'm not a fan of, and I really don't like the cotton that's on the interior, that really soft baby pink color. I don't like it. I like the color, I don't like the fabric. I wish that the binding strip was 1/2 inch wider. I actually wish that they had made this pattern with a larger seam allowance. It was a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that I think caused me a lot of issue. And I really wish that instead of a 1/4 inch, it was 1/2 inch. And that would have given me a little bit more wiggle room. Like this, like these here, I had to go back over on one side several times to make sure that I caught everything when I was sewing it. So you wouldn't see like how this is looking with like the fraying here, right? Or like how this is fraying here. Like I wanted to get all of that caught beforehand. I'll make this bag again. It's gonna be, I don't know if it's gonna be a project revisit for next year or if I'm gonna slot it in somewhere else. I don't know if I'm gonna make the alternative project sometime this year or if I'm gonna make that sometime next year. I'm all kind of up in the air about it. So, I'm going to ask you what you think about this project. Did you like it? Have you made it? Do you have, like, recommendations on how to, like, do that binding better? Normally I say to you all that it was a little difficult, but I got it done. So, most Sewers Club projects are beginner friendly. I don't think this one is. It gave me a lot of problems. And I think that it was a skill level thing rather than like a, oh, if I just understood the instructions better, or if I pushed through it, it would be different. I honestly think this was more skill related than beginner issue related, if that makes any sense. But yeah, so I'm gonna do my sign off now because I'd like to edit this video, and as similar to last week, I'm feeling a lot better this week. Today's Monday, July 18th. And last Monday is when my cold hit me really hard. But now all I have left is a bit of a sore throat, a little bit of like sinus congestion, which always happens when I get sick. It's always a lingering thing, and I'm just really tired. So, yeah, when I'm done filming this, I think I'm going to take a little baby nap, come back and edit it. Anyway, so, what do you think of this project? What could I have done to be better with it? If you have made this, or if you are starting to make it, let me know if you think the fabric is as fussy as I think it is, or if that is really a me issue, not being used to such a lighter weight material. I'd really be interested to know all of those things in the comments down below. Or let me know if you're going to do the alternative project as well. Like, that looks pretty interesting and quite a bit more simpler. So maybe I'll take a look at my upcoming projects, and maybe it'll make its way in sometime this summer. I don't know. And with all of that being said, I'm going to say subscribe if you want more. If you want to see more sewing content, every single Wednesday is a sewing video. Like the video if you can understand the struggle that I felt making this one. Comment, because I like to see what you have to say, especially when it comes to things that have been giving me such difficulty like this. And let me know if you think interfacing in these would actually help too. Like, I have so many questions when it comes to like the final product of this guy. And with all of that being said, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching, and I will talk with you again soon. Bye!